In the 1980s, the National Basketball Association, or the NBA, was in a ditch of unpopularity and drug usage, and there seemed to be no escape. That is why David Stern fixed the first ever draft lottery in 1985. During the 1980s, America was at the pinnacle of the crack cocaine epidemic, and so is the NBA. It was estimated in a report from the Los Angeles Times in 1980 that 40 to 75% of NBA players used cocaine. A majority of the players in the NBA were hooked on cocaine due to widespread drug abuse throughout America and the uneducation of the side effects it causes. This cocaine addiction was ruining many careers of aspiring NBA players. That was the case for draft prospect Len Bias, who was drafted as a second overall pick by the Boston Celtics in the 1986 NBA draft. Len Bias was the top prospect out of college and was projected to be even better than Michael Jordan. He was going to be the greatest player of all time and is considered by many people to be the greatest player to never play professional basketball. Unfortunately, due to a cocaine overdose, he died just 2 days after he was drafted. Len Bias is just one example of why cocaine was such an issue in the NBA and to other players' careers. The crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s was the biggest reason that contributed to David Stern's decision to rig the first ever NBA draft lottery. Other than the massive drug issue within the association, the NBA had more problems that needed to be fixed in the best, fastest way possible. At this time, the NBA was struggling with a very high amount of unpopularity and a bad reputation. Because of this uninterest, the TV deal the NBA had with CBS was going to expire after the 1986 season and showed no signs of renewal. The NBA's unpopularity mainly came from its reputation as a league of thugs. Americans viewed the league through racist stereotypes of drug use, violence, and gang-like acts, which were then perpetuated by the athletes. Also, the many fights that broke out between teams and players were viewed as thuggish acts. The crack cocaine epidemic, the bad reputation, and extreme unpopularity of the NBA were the reasons that David Stern knew he needed to do something, even if it went against his own conscience, to save the NBA. David Stern put all his hope in the hands of one player, the one player that he knew would save the NBA, the player that was the final piece of the puzzle in his master plan, Patrick Ewing.
In college, three-time All-American Patrick Ewing was one of the most dominant players ever. At 7 feet tall, Patrick Ewing was able to dominate his college competition and put up averages of 15 points and 10 rebounds while playing at Georgetown University. Ewing helped lead Georgetown to a national title in 1984 and was awarded the NCAA National College Player of the Year in 1985. His incredible college career led him to be a consensus first overall pick in the 1985 NBA Draft. Despite never being able to win a championship, Patrick Ewing is presently considered to be one of the best players to ever play in the NBA. He finished his career as an 11-time All-Star, 10 combined All-NBA team appearances, and was the 1986 Rookie of the Year. Ewing was a part of the NBA's 50th anniversary all-time team alongside players like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson. There is no doubt that Patrick Ewing was a top prospect coming out of college, and every team wanted him on their roster. David Stern knew that he needed Patrick Ewing to be on the NBA's biggest, most promising franchise, the New York Knicks, for the NBA to be saved, and had to figure out a way for that to become a reality. That is when he made the biggest decision of his life. The way the draft lottery was set up before David Stern and the NBA changed it was not admired by many people. The two worst teams in each division would face off in an intense coin flip to see who received the first overall pick. The team that lost the coin toss received the second pick, and the rest of the first-round picks were determined in reverse order of the win-loss record for every other team. This system encouraged teams to tank, or in other words, purposely lose, for a chance at the first overall pick. To counter acquisitions of teams purposely losing games, David Stern voted to change the NBA draft lottery into a better, more sensible way to decide lottery picks. This also gave him the perfect opportunity to guarantee a way that Patrick Ewing could end up on the New York Knicks. The new system worked like this. Each team was given an envelope that was put into a big plastic ball, which was then rotated to mix up the envelopes. The team whose envelope was drawn first would receive the first pick in the draft. The process was repeated until the remaining lottery picks were decided. This gave each non-playoff team an equal chance at the first overall pick. This new lottery system gave David Stern the perfect opportunity to purposely let the New York Knicks get the first pick in the 1985 draft so that they could select Patrick Ewing.
David Stern figured out an obvious way to increase the NBA's popularity and land a massive new TV deal with CBS by putting the NBA's most hyped draft prospect on one of its biggest markets. Now that David Stern established a new way of deciding draft picks, and at the perfect time with a young, potential-filled Patrick Ewing entering the league, it was time for him to put together the final piece of the puzzle, the execution of the plan. David Stern had to pull this off perfectly for the sake of the NBA, and perfectly he did. So how did he do it? David Stern was not alone in his mischievous endeavor, for he had the help of his colleagues. One of the men helping him, who possibly played the biggest part in Stern's plan, was Jack Wagner. Wagner worked for the accounting firm E&W. E&W was also the auditing firm for Gulf and Western Incorporated, who happened to own the New York Knicks. This meant that Jack Wagner, the man putting the envelopes into the plastic ball, had direct ties to the New York Knicks. Jack Wagner knew exactly which envelope belonged to New York, so as he put each envelope in, he banged the Knicks envelope on the metal bar inside of the ball that helped it rotate. Doing so, Wagner bent the corner of their envelope, signaling to Stern exactly which one he needed to pick first. Before choosing the Knicks envelope, Stern took a deep breath because he knew he had to get this right on the first try if he had any chance at saving the NBA. Instead of picking the envelope on the top, David Stern took hold of the one with the bent corner that was buried under plenty of the others, and pulled it out of the ball. With no coincidence whatsoever, he opened the envelope, pulled out the Knicks logo, and revealed it to the crowd with a giant sense of relief on his face. With all the evidence presented, there is no doubt that David Stern rigged the first ever NBA draft lottery in 1985. In fact, a few months before the lottery, Stan Kasten, who was the general manager of the Atlanta Hawks at the time, was attending a college tournament in Hawaii. Stan Kasten remembered talking to a man who was absolutely convinced Patrick Ewing was going to end up on the Knicks. I was sitting next to a couple of NBA guys, and I remember one high-ranking team executive, who I will not name, was 1,000,000% convinced of what was going to happen. "He's going to the Knicks, he's going to the Knicks," he kept saying. "He's going to the Knicks, it's all arranged." David Stern compromised his morals and dignity, and also took a big risk, knowing that if he was caught in the act, he and the entire NBA would crumble in the scrutiny of the fans, players, and people around the world. Stern took the biggest risk of his life and executed his plan to perfection.
Analyzing the circumstances, David Stern knew he had to do whatever it took to save the NBA, no matter the backlash he could take or the consequences that could happen. The NBA experienced its greatest boost in popularity during the late 80s and is now one of the biggest sports leagues and markets around the world. If it wasn't for David Stern, the NBA would not be as successful, popular, and inspiring as it is today.
David Stern rigged the first ever draft lottery in 1985 to save the NBA, and by doing so, kept the hopes and dreams of aspiring young players alive and the hearts of basketball fans around the world fulfilled. David Stern ultimately saved the game of basketball with the choice he made and allowed the NBA to strive and prosper for many years to come.